Down or even the previous one created a huge deal with people's sleeping cycle. Have you dealt with that? Have you struggled to go to bed to say till 3 in the morning and kept on checking Instagram and everything possible to make sure that you fall asleep, but no matter what we do, it keeps on coming back, it keeps troubling us. Today's conversation is especially from your questions that you had asked, and somebody called Veena asked me specifically to address the issue about sleeping. Now, I have been thinking about it because one of my clients who I'm working with for high performance coaching is on sleeping pills, and no matter how he manages to look at this problem, he keeps on coming back to the whole addiction to sleeping pills. So I've been thinking about it, reading about it, so I thought it would be a good idea for us to talk about the whole sleeping struggle and everything that is happening during the lockdown. So if you have any questions, anything specific, keep mentioning it. I will address all the questions once we are done talking about today's conversation, and I will get back to all the comments that you have, everything. Okay, so when we talk about this whole sleeping as an idea, before I walk into this topic and say anything about it, I have to tell you this one thing about me. I think sleeping is my superpower, like to a point that every single time I feel okay, something is going wrong in my life, one moment, I feel like I can sleep anywhere. I can sleep without fan, without AC, in the noisiest places, in the like the most difficult. Like every time I go out and travel with my friends, they tease me on this, that in the middle of the conversation in something like how people get excited about so many things, I can go to bed and I can sleep anyhow. Now, this is one thing that my sister teased me about throughout my life, because we have very different patterns, and she struggles to sleep and I absolutely can go to bed like this. Now, having said that, when I was going through my anxiety, there were 3 days, and I'm not kidding you, there were 3 days, consecutive days, where I could not fall asleep. So this whole phase of my anxiety, which went for more than say a year or like 12-14 months, and at the end of it, there were 3 days I could not sleep, and I was like awake throughout the night staring at the ceiling, and that was my wake-up call. The fact that I could not sleep became my wake-up call, and I'm like, I cannot do this, I have to take actions. So I think in those 3 nights, I made the whole plan to figure out how I'm going to go ahead, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to solve the problem. All of that I did. But when I talk to people and when they talk about having this prolonged issue, I am not the most experienced person when it comes to understanding insomnia. Having said that, when it came to Calmsutra, the stroke practice, so many people told us that they could go off their sleeping pills, their insomnia issue, their challenges with relaxing their nervous system, and that's why it is important that we talk about it, because if that is your challenge, if that is your issue, we can address it like this. It can become like your simplest way to solve the problem. Okay, now let's jump in and understand how sleeping cycle works. Have you ever seen this? I hope you can. Yeah. Have you seen this entire cycle of what exactly happens to our brain activities? How do we fall asleep? What are different ways in which we connect to things? So when you are active, when you're going through your everyday routine, this is what happens to your mind. Can you see the brain activities are falling and the waves are becoming longer and longer as you start relaxing? This is like a meditation. I also believe when you do a stroke practice, you're somewhere here, but then when you fall deep asleep, you go somewhere here. Now this is another level, but let's talk about this one. Now, person with anxiety, what do? Every time they want to fall asleep, every time they're walking deeper in that whole lane of sleeping, where the mind starts relaxing your muscles, starts relaxing your physical and mental aspect, mental functioning, your body gets activated with an anxious thought. As a flight or fright mechanism, what does body do? It automatically trains you to deal with the danger. Now, when anxiety is very, very active, every single dangerous moment is what body prepares for. Now, when the body is preparing for that moment, you cannot fall into these waves. Please understand. it comes back. So somewhere from here, it comes back all the way here, because you're active, you're willing to fight the battle that you have in front of you, and you cannot be relaxing, because the very moment you relax, your body loses its control over your muscles, loses control over your active thinking, and in anxiety, in anxious moments, you cannot be doing it. Now do you realize, when you're anxious throughout the day, why you cannot fall asleep in the night? It's an essential aspect. This is like, so many times I feel sleeping, the way you sleep or how deep you sleep is a representation or a mirror of how you're going about your day. Do you agree? What you eat, what you do, how you deal with situations, everything at the end of the day is represented by the sleep cycle. Because when you have a great day, when you are really engaged in activities, and when you absolutely get tired or exhausted, by the end of the day you fall asleep like this. But on the other side, when you cannot do that, when you constantly keep fighting it, when you constantly have days where you haven't done much, then the sleep cycle becomes very shallow, and thereby you cannot reach the depth of relaxation. And then you wake up drowsy, and then you deal with other things where you're not feeling up to the mark, and those challenges are representing what is happening in your mind, representing how you're dealing with the problem at hand. Right? Now what we're going to do is, I want to talk to you about the specific idea when you are falling into this whole emotional state of mind. Physical, we understand, okay, sleeping has its own cycle and all of the things, but during the lockdown, a few things that have happened. One of the most important things is your physical activity has reduced tremendously. So when you go out, when you are constantly interacting with things and you're moving around, we know that the physical activity is much higher. But it is not only about how much you move, it's also about the alertness that you require. So when we are out in the sun, our alertness is much higher. So when you are completely alert, your body requires the other side of being completely relaxed, completely calm, and then you fall asleep. So that both way process is absolutely something that we have to look at. If you're not active enough, you cannot be falling asleep easily. So that is one essential aspect. So keep that in mind. Do not try to go around it. Do not try to say, okay, yeah, it's fine. I'm not putting on weight and I don't have to work out. I don't have to go out in the sun. Now we cannot leave the house. But for most houses, the sun comes in. But we are so careful about our skin, so careful about, all the tanning, that we do not even dare to go close to the sun. So please look at it, not at I'm not saying scorching sun in the afternoon, but it is important that we look at early mornings, early evenings, where actually sun is out there. For 2-3 years, I kept studying the sun cycle. And sun cycle is where you wake up 2 hours before the sunrise, and then it's like a very important time where you meditate, and then you go about your day and you have your dinner before sunset. So for 3 years, I followed that cycle. 2.5-3 years. And it is very interesting how your body, like all other animals, actually follow the cycle. And more I studied that, more I looked at things, I started realizing that actually the activity of your brain is very high when you are up and about with the sun. Now we do not do that. We go to bed like say 3-4 in the morning, and then we wake up wherever 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and that's what lockdown did for most people. And when you approach your day from that space, it becomes even more difficult, because you don't know how to then look at your sleep cycle, which has already gone out of the toss, right? Like absolutely broken completely. And it is against how our bodies are designed. Another thing which we have spoken about, binge eating. So if you eat after the sunset, and all of us, are like, we are trained to have proper heavy dinner. But if you eat after sunset, and if you eat like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, further you go from the sunset time and you keep eating, heavier food takes longer time to digest. And if your body is active, and I'm specifically talking to people who have light sleep, who are struggling to sleep, you got to make these lifestyle changes and observe. If it works for you, pick it up and do more research around it, talk to experts. I'm not an expert in this field, but I'm also talking from my personal experience, how I coped up with anxiety, because I realized if my mind is active and it's making me all anxious, the other side is I need to get my body to relax to a point that it doesn't add to my mental activity. Does that make sense? So you remember that quote I kept repeating throughout. I said, if your body is feeling helpless in the moment, then lead from your mind. And if your mind is being useless, then lead from your body. So here we are leading from body, because the very moment you think of the mind is going crazy. It is absolutely creating all the challenges and making sure that you stay stuck in this thought process. And I'm going to come and talk about the thought process, obviously. But before we get there, I want to clear the physicality aspects. Now you know about this. There are some teas like chamomile teas and some relaxing green herbal teas that are available that can actually slow down your activation, your stimulation. Now what happens with stimulation? Any sort of stimulation, okay? Loud music could be stimulation, all 5 senses. Any stimulation requires some time to calm down. So if you are stimulated in one way, the other side, for your mind and for your body to get away from all these senses, it takes time. Now if that stimulation, and if it is about, say, caffeine stimulation, say alcohol stimulation, and if your body is not falling asleep because of that, then this is something that you got to observe. Now we cannot, like the way we talk about the mental health, and we constantly keep talking about things we can do to stay alert and agile and like be engaged in activity, and then do it with relaxation. That's like the whole theme of this Calmsutra in the lockdown, right? Everything that we do, we want to operate from calmness, and we want to make sure that we do it in a manner that we allow our minds and bodies to be at its best. Now if you're doing it, if you want, and that bow and arrow example again, if I really want my arrow to go further, I need to pull it back, and I need to have that inertia, and then it can store that energy and it can go forward. Your sleep is that mechanism of pulling your arrow back when it is about to fly. So in the morning, when you do not wake up really energetic, it is a mirror of your previous day has not worked out the way it should. So if you start looking at your sleep as your mirror, you'll start realizing that you got to make some changes. And in my capacity, if you have understood how I function by now, I would do everything in my capacity that would allow me to be able to deliver, to be able to be engaged in the moment, to be fully available to this conversation or this moment. And you cannot do that if your mind is not with you, if your body is not with you. So we take these instruments of mind and body to allow us to move forward, right? And that's why we constantly keep talking about using body to use that as a mechanism, because mind sometimes does not follow a path. So when we do journaling, when we do stroke practice, we actually allow that whole mechanism to take us to the next level. If we do not do that, if we do not bother about all these things, then all we do is we stop ourselves in our own tracks and then keep fighting. So let's talk about, what do you do when you do not sleep? Can anybody tell me, what is your general activity? Are you on Instagram? Are you watching YouTube or Netflix? What do you do? Like, you decide to fall asleep, you say, okay, now it's my time to go to bed, but because I'm not feeling that drowsy, I'm not feeling that sleepy, I'm going to do something. What is that activity? And it's essential that you start tracking what that activity is. We watch web series, okay? Aparna is saying we used to keep thinking, okay? You keep looking at things that are working, not working. Manan is saying binge eat. Of course, that is something that naturally happens, because so many times people binge eat because they are bored, and food is a great stimulant, so they immediately feel like excited, and all of that happens. Shivani says overthinking, watching tech videos, because that's the time to buy that next really important technology, of course. Anu is saying Netflix, Instagram, and play Sudoku, okay, again, like something which allow your brain to be activated. Abhijit is saying I listen to podcast, okay. Beena is saying chanting helps, okay. So all these activities, like besides chanting, and Varsha is saying overthinking, besides chanting, I would say so many other activities are constantly getting us into a trap over and over again. Okay, other thing is shopping portals. Of course, we have so many places to go and we have to shop all the fashion jewelries now, especially during the lockdown. And even if we are not shopping, we constantly keep looking at things that we may buy. Priya is saying I read books. Pramod is saying when I am not able to fall asleep, I still lay down and go through the days, good or bad, and clear my head of judgments I am unknowingly piling up. Okay. So that is again a clearing process. So when your mind is active, you are constantly processing information. Okay. Now, all these things and most of these things, if you evaluate, you will find there is a pattern. There's a pattern that we keep falling into, and there's a pattern that you know that your body is not exhausted enough for you to fall asleep. Pooja is saying your voice is calming, so I listen to your Insta recordings at night. I get more relaxed and sleep well. Pooja, I didn't know the other benefits of my voice, but thank you. So the idea, even when I am talking or anybody is listening to positive or any talk, one is we are unwinding our minds, and another is we are stimulating our minds. We all know the difference between the two, right? So if it is stimulating, if it is activating, it feels different. When it is really calming down and if it is settling you down, it feels different. Now you've got to find out which activities you actually engage in. Now, if we look at it, if we actually want to build a day which is completely driven by engagement, it would go like from intense activity to another intense activity to one more intense activity to one more intense activity, and when you decide to fall asleep, in like 5 minutes you would just go intensely in your zone and you will sleep. Right? Now these could be the mechanisms that you can use, but we do not get intensely involved through the day. So one of the reasons why insomnia has become such a big problem is not because we don't know how to fall asleep in a deep manner. We do not know how to be engaged in activities in a deep manner. We remain shallow with most of our conversations. We remain shallow with most of our experiences. We remain shallow in most of our engagement with things. And when it comes to falling asleep, our bodies are not intensely activated in any manner for it to fall asleep on the other side. Okay, so if we have to break the cycle, anxiety is a pattern, and if you know a pattern, like something about pattern, that it has a predictable path, right? If any pattern that I talk about, it is a predictable path, and if you know the predictable result, you can break the pattern. If you know where it's gonna go and how it's gonna be on the other side, you can break the pattern. My request to you is, if you are recommended sleeping pills, then at least after 2 or 3 weeks, stop. It is an easier way to disconnect from your system. It's an easier way to stop your communication with your body. It's the easiest way for you to absolutely be unaware about in what is happening in your system by popping pills. So if you're doing it, and I understand it is a tough matter and something that you cannot get to immediately, but it's my genuine request that please do not get into this habit of knocking off with a pill. Because if you do that, the body's mechanism to communicate with you is blocked. And when other things happen, when anything that becomes, because it is a mirror, as I said, right? If you fog your mirror, you can't see what is happening. If you imagine, if you have a mirror that shows what's going wrong with your skin or with your face, and instead of addressing the problem, you make a picture, you Photoshop it, and you absolutely stick it on your mirror and say, okay, every time I look into the mirror, now I feel good about myself. Will that solve the problem? And if the answer to that question is no, then that's exactly what you do with sleeping pills. So if you're recommended by your doctor for whatever medical condition, most of the time it is done only for 2 to 3 weeks. But because it is so relaxing, people get used to the sedatives and they do not want to come back and deal with the issue. So my request to you, my friend, if any time that you think that you can push your issue under the carpet in whichever way, it could be financial, it could be health concern, it could be relationship issue. If you think pushing it under the carpet will solve the problem, please be assured that solving the problem is a short-term solution. The very moment the carpet will be pulled out by somebody or by you, suddenly you will realize that the same problem that I thought I have dealt with comes back with vengeance, comes back with more energy to it, with more probably infection attached with it. And we do not want to deal with it then, so you might as well look at it at the point where you can really solve it right away. There was this study done, I forgot the name of the book, I read it many years ago. I think it is The God is in Detail, but not like the fiction, the actual book about detailing. So in that book, they spoke about that they did this research about how hotel industry takes care of these huge properties and how do they manage the properties. And one of the things they realized that if a small screw is coming off from one of the handles, eventually it can actually spoil the entire door fitting. But we do not know, we do not pay attention to that small screw. We wait it out for something to go absolutely wrong, and when things go wrong, you're like, oh, why this door is spoiled over the other door where there was no issue with the screw. So literally with our minds, the similar example is applicable. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect and like, oh my god, every screw has to be fixed and I have to be in control and I have to make sure I keep checking on things. That's not the idea. But anytime you become aware of a problem that is getting to you, instead of pushing it under the carpet, if you start looking at it, we'll be able to solve it, resolve it in a better manner. Okay. Now, what should we do? So if you're popping pills right now, please look at it as a concern area and at least ask, start walking towards the phase where you won't have that as an issue. So that is one thing. Second thing, I spoke about multiple physical things that you can try and experiment with and see what food activates and what food allows you to calm down, what timings work better for you. So literally keep experimenting until you find your own balance to feel that level of relaxation. The third thing, very important, is when you are intensely involved in something throughout your day, you actually have the possibility of falling asleep on the other side. Okay. Fourth thing that we spoke about is when you are actually doing things, actually going about your sleep cycle, observing and keeping that awareness about your body is an essential aspect here. We can't escape that part. Now let me come to the fifth point, which is overthinking. Now most people think not being able to sleep is about overthinking. And what does happen in overthinking? We have covered that topic completely, but today I want to talk about it in a way that if we actually have very strong points, attachments, very strong do's and don'ts about life, and expectations and desires about life, then our attachments are so strong that if we fall asleep, a part of us feels that, oh my god, I might lose on this aspect. I might not be able to see things for what they are. I might not be able to understand if things just go out of my hand. So I might as well stay awake and I might as well do the job I'm supposed to do. So that alertness of mind also comes from lots of things that are playing on our mind. Now, if you know the quote by Rumi, he says, beyond right and wrong, there is a garden and I will see you there. Right? The line that was translated in Rockstar movie, and in Hindi they say, sahi aur galat ke pare ek मैदान है, मैं तुम्हें वहाँ मिलूंगा. Right? So when you look at relationships, when you look at everything, that right and wrong, that this must be done and this shouldn't be done, is where we remain stuck. And even when it comes to giving up those points, giving up that control, it keeps on getting back to you. I'm going to read this like a little part of a Zen philosophy, which I thought was very powerful and very well written in that manner. So it's a verse called the faith mind. Okay, it goes like, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up, and please hear this last line very carefully, to set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. And let's understand this one a bit more. Okay, the very moment you have preferences, the very moment you have this is what is me and this is what I think is very cool, and if I do it, this is my standard, everything else other than that becomes a problem for you to deal with. You're like, but then my job is to make sure that I live up to my standard, but I also stay away from the things that are not my standard. If I hang out with certain kind of people, or if my image is built by certain kind of aspects, like I am cool in this manner and I am nice in that manner and I am well connected, whatever image you're trying to project, if that image becomes very, very important in your own mind, then anything that is against that image is something that you have to push yourself away from. And when that happens, when you keep pushing yourself away from things that you don't want to identify with, is where a lot of our controlling, lot of our anxieties come from. And this is a very small thing, like, we think, but I say it like my style, right? Like, this is what I think I am. Now, most of the time, the identification where you feel associated with anything. Some people believe I'm like this positive person, and it's a nice thing. Even if it is a nice thing, it comes from identification. And every time you actually have that identification, you belong to something, you represent something, you start resisting the other part of it. And people think that, okay, I might be attached to only those things that I like. You'll be surprised at how attached you are to things that you do not like. And that attachment is not by holding it back, that attachment is by resisting it with whole energy. Now, I want you to quickly do this assignment with me. I want you to think about 3 things that you genuinely adore in other people. Write them down, okay? And 3 things that you absolutely detest in other people. For example, you really, really adore when somebody is confident, and you cannot stand when somebody is lying, right? Traits. So just pick up the 3 things that you absolutely adore about other people and 3 things that you absolutely detest about other people. Okay, so just keep making note of these things, write them down. You can write in the comment box 3 things that you absolutely adore about other people and 3 things that you cannot stand when it comes to other people. The way people express love, jovial nature, and hard work is what I love and adore, okay? Focus, dedication, passion is what you love, Aparna says, okay? Give me both, give me the other side too. Asmita is saying confidence, caring nature, and vision that people have, okay? That's what you adore. And when someone is prioritizing themselves and create their own world, that you adore, Asmita says, okay. What is the other side? Give me the other side also. 3 things that you detest about other people. Things that you cannot stand. Truthfulness, loyalty, being grounded, okay. Everybody is writing about things you adore. Also give me things that you detest. You hate when people are people who pull fast stories, okay, show off and tell lies, okay, makes sense. Hate ego and arrogance in other people. Sheetal is saying dedicated, making another person comfortable, hardworking is what you love. What you hate is when people put other people down without being conscious of it, okay? When people lie, when they are two-faced people, and when they are not loyal. Detest ego, stubbornness, being a liar, dishonesty, impoliteness, disagreement, okay? When people act insensitive, okay? Now I want you to look at your list, okay? It has irresponsibility, laziness, it has lies and not understanding other people, shallowness, undependable, non-dependable behavior, rude behavior. Now look at these both things in your list. Now, if we understand that we project ourselves on the world that we interact with, you'll realize an essential aspect here. The aspect is, when I look at myself, the things I adore in other people are the things that I genuinely want to create within myself. I look at them and I really want to use the similar traits to create them within myself. At the same time, things that we detest in other people are the things that we are constantly trying to go around when it comes to ourselves. So at no point we want to be looked at as those things that we detest in other people, because we have done so much to make sure that no one in the world should think about me in that negative light the way I understand negativity. Have you seen these people who are vegetarian, like pure vegetarian people, at some point start believing that they're pure people, right? They have this pure and pious kind of aura around them, and it also brings a righteousness about being vegetarians, which is not true, obviously. It's just a food choice, but it happens to people, and then they start looking down upon people who are non-vegetarian, and vice versa. I have seen non-vegetarians looking down upon vegetarian people. So I'm just giving you an example. So many times with our preferences, with our fixed ideas about what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what must be done, what I support and what I detest, we keep on creating the pull and we keep dividing the world. So are we saying we shouldn't have opinions? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying more we stay entangled, more we identify with these roles, absolutely we understand. When we identify with these roles of like, I shouldn't be egoistic, or I shouldn't take other people's bullshit, whatever roles we identify with, we become overburdened by these thoughts. You do whatever you got to do, which is one thing, but constantly staying in resistance or in attachment with things create all the weight that you experience. So anytime you see somebody identifying you in a wrong box, you have to fight it down. You have to break their opinion, prove them wrong, or put that point across that, wait, you cannot be understanding me as a wrong person. You should be understanding me as ABC. Or you feel all that anger because how can you think I am this person? I'm absolutely not egoistic because I hate egoistic people. And this identification, this fight between the two is what keeps on creating the mental activity which is unending. Now, the fight could be your opinion versus your husband's opinion. The fight could be your choices versus your neighbor's choices. The fight could be what you should be doing versus what your boss should be doing. It could be anything. But most of the time, we identify so much with our opinions that we keep on clashing with other people's against our opinions. So the question that I want to ask you in today's journaling, especially when you cannot fall asleep, when you're constantly struggling with all your thoughts going all over the place, and if that is a concern, you must look at this question even more seriously. But even if that is not a concern, it's a very, very important question to look at. Ask yourself that every time I identify with an idea, am I limiting myself in a particular manner? Okay, so if we let me explain this. Okay, how am I limiting myself with each idea that I identify with? So you will say, oh, I identify myself to be a feminist. Okay, how am I limiting myself with that idea? I identify myself for being an aggressive person or assertive person. How am I limiting myself with that? So whatever you identify yourself with. Now, I spoke about this 2 days back. Personality is a process. Now, process because you have designed that process. Knowingly, unknowingly doesn't matter. But personality is a process. Every time you identify with an idea, an identification, as I already told you or we discussed about it, identification could be for things or identification could be against things. So if I'm against something, I still identify with this. If I'm for something, I still identify with this. Now, what we really want to achieve with the things we do is we want to be able to look at things for what they are. And when we have these identifications, they work as filters. One of the quickest example is when you have the identification that works as a red, huge goggle on your eyes, you look at a white wall and you always find it pink. And say, I love this pink wall. And the person next to you like, but it's not pink. You're like, oh, I can see it pink, so it must be pink. Because of your goggles, you look at them and it looks pink to you because you're wearing red goggles. Someone else who is wearing like black goggles looks at the same thing, and from his shades, the same white wall looks grayish because of the tinge that he has on his shades. Now, it's not about the truth that anybody is interested in. We're only interested in our opinions. You know, when I always see these online trollers or people who make very strong comments against other people, I always feel that they vehemently believe in certain views to a point that they want to put across that view to even hurt the person that they're talking to. That whole aggressiveness comes from the point that their opinion matters so much. Now, even if that opinion that you're holding on to is for the betterment of your child, if you hold on to it so tightly that you'll end up abusing or hurting your child, how are we solving the problem? You say, but I mean well, and I'm doing it because I want my child to grow, and I want my child to move forward, and I want my child to do, better in life. If you hold it on to a point where you make your child feel horrible about himself or herself through the process only because of your opinion and not because it is right or incorrect, you're just doing it because you believe in that particular idea. How are we solving the problem? Okay, so we're gonna get to the S-stroke practice, the Calmsutra practice. I'm gonna walk you through the process. All you got to do is keep the question that I asked in your mind. So the question, I'm just going to repeat: how am I limiting myself every time when I identify with certain ideas? Now pick up an idea, say I identify myself to be X, and you'll be surprised. You're like, no, but that can't be true. I do not, I don't have this. Do the practice. You'll be surprised to see how you've been limiting yourself, how you do not hang with people who have opposite ideas, how you have that subtle judgment about people who are on the other side. And how will it help your sleeping patterns when you don't have these fights and battles to cover throughout the day? By the time you go to bed, you are mostly light on your feet. You're light in your mind. You're not necessarily fighting and feeling heavy in your emotions because somebody has wronged you and somebody doesn't agree with you and somebody doesn't believe in what you're doing. Absolutely, all these things which generally go against you do not, like that weight that you're carrying, like extra weight, starts dropping. Okay, I'm going to get to the S-stroke practice. All you require is a ruled page and a ballpoint pen. Okay, simple, humble ballpoint pen, no gel pen, no pencil, nothing fancy. We absolutely want the ballpoint pen, and it's important because the pressure of the writing must be maintained. Whatever is the pressure of your writing, do not change the pressure of your writing ever. Like even when I go give people graphotherapy, I do not ever change the pressure of your writing. So make sure you stick to the pressure and just continue the practice. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera. Give me a moment. There you go. So when we do today's S-stroke practice, we follow the same instructions that we generally have. People on Facebook and YouTube, you'll have to give me 5 minutes. I'm going to do the practice. If you want to look for the video while we are doing this, it's on the YouTube channel of ours. The name is Aditi Surana, and you can find the link by the calmness video. It's like the first video that you'll find on the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the formation, which is a continuous formation of flow. And when we do that, this is a stroke that we are trying to get to. When I talk about being completely involved in the stroke, do the practice as if each stroke matters and employ your body completely. I'm doing it to make sure that this is how we train our bodies. If you're talking to someone, be 100% in the conversation and be fully present, intensely involved. If you're cooking, be completely involved. Get all your senses to be completely involved here. If you're writing, whatever you're doing, each activity can allow you to be that intensely involved. You know, you might have heard of these stories in Zen literature where they say the master called the disciple and asked the disciple to only put the stones in the garden in a row. And for 5 years, the disciple did only one thing. And it sounds so stupid to most of us. Like one thing, like really, how do you grow? How do you find your salvation by just putting stones in a row? But it is not in the activity. When you keep doing the same activity with intensity and with complete involvement, it brings out so many different nuances, and you'll be surprised how that practice can mold us. The S-stroke practice, which is done along with your breath, actually has the capacity to do that. So make sure that you breathe slightly longer than your normal breath. Breathe slightly longer than normal. Don't jump into deep breathing, that's not the idea. Slightly, you keep making your breath deeper and deeper. That is the idea. Each loop, each knot in the stroke matters. You know, this particular stroke, as you are looking at the page, I want to talk about it. In graphology, we divide each line. So for example, this zone, this particular part, like the middle part of the writing, is about your day-to-day activities. The upper part of the writing is about your brain, your intellectual activities, and this is like for your stomach, and if you know, like anything day to day, like the mundane activity. The lower part, which is missing in this particular stroke, is about the lower physical activity, the physicality of the body, or execution or sex. Now when we practice this stroke, what we are doing, I bring a stroke, I create a knot here, I go up, I create another knot, I create one more knot, I go another knot. Now what I'm doing actually with this stroke, and if I have to break it down for you to understand cognitively, for some people who are asking questions like, how does it work, why does it work, what exactly happens underneath that. Now when you understand the stroke formation, I start with dealing with an everyday problem, something that is making me feel the challenge in my everyday life. Now I go up to my brain part or my intellectual part, and I create one more knot. Now a knot in a brain space here in this particular stroke is about solving the problem, going beyond, it's like it's an intense activity. Then I come back and I address another issue, then I go back up again, I think through it, then I come back and I deal with one more issue, and then I go up and I deal with one more solution. Now when you practice, what is being calm? That I keep having a problem and I deal with the solution, and I have another problem and I come up with another solution, and a problem and a solution, and a problem and a solution. I get so good with this whole mechanism that no matter what problem comes my way, I know I have the capacity to deal with it. Now this is like the long explanation to why the stroke quickly brings that sense of calmness to you. So it is not like any formation. So when people ask me, if I practice another letter, will it create the same impact? No. If I do not have the loops open, will it create the same impact? No, because every single formation, from the point I always insist that do not have a tail. A long tail in the beginning talks about how you linger before you start the actual process. If you have a tail that goes in the air at the end, it talks about how you have tapering, indecisive attitude when it comes to finally executing what you have done. Now these two things we do not want. We want all the loops open. If the flow stops of the stroke, then you're not necessarily achieving the flow that we want to create between problem solution, right? And that's why each single aspect is important. I'm going to talk a little bit more about breath when I switch the camera. So just give me 2 minutes to switch it over. One moment.